Howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. I thought we were done with the gun control conversation, but I guess not. We've got a whole bunch of comments in the comments section that have questions, and I got some PM to me. Some of them are really important. Today we're going to talk about gun control, guns, and race. Because the two questions I got, they're in direct contradiction to each other, and they show exactly how muddled this conversation has gotten because of talking points. The first question was, is it true that most Second Amendment supporters are racists? Oh no. Oh no, no, no. I'm sure that from the outside looking in, the gun community looks like one group of people. Let's be honest, we all pretty much look the same. There's a clear divide within the gun community. You have Second Amendment supporters, real Second Amendment supporters, and you have gun nuts or firearm enthusiasts, whatever you want to call them. A Second Amendment supporter wants minorities to have firearms. In fact, they have outreach programs for that purpose. The intent of the Second Amendment is to strike back against government tyranny. If you understand that, odds are you understand that historically, when a government becomes tyrannical, it goes after marginalized and minority groups first. So a Second Amendment supporter is very avid in their push to arm minorities. Now, at the same time, Second Amendment supporters are not known for being diplomatic. They say things at times that are let's just say not tactful. Things like armed gays don't get bashed. And when you hear that, you're like, man, what is wrong with this guy? What he's hoping to do is jar you into buying a firearm. It may sound bigoted, but it's coming from a good place. From where he's standing, he's hoping that you're going to arm yourselves so nothing bad happens to you. It may not always come off that way. Second Amendment supporters are more violent in their rhetoric. In fact, this is a good one because it's violent rhetoric and it deals with race. I caught a 30-day ban on Facebook because I shared a picture. The picture, when you look at it, it's a black and white photo of a bunch of white folk at a picnic. It's what it looks like if you just glance at it. The caption says, "Why do you need a 30-round magazine?" And the people at the picnic are numbered 1 through 30. It sounds crazy until you realize that's not a picnic. It's a lynching. You can see the feet hanging in a tree, and they're all looking at the camera smiling. That is a very popular image within the Second Amendment community, not so much within the gun nut community. There's a difference in philosophy. The Second Amendment crowd wants to decentralize power. They want, if everybody's armed, it breaks up the government's monopoly on violence. They understand that the Second Amendment came into play to get the Civil Rights Act passed. The gun nut community is more about might makes right. They're more about keeping that power for their in-group. You don't hear a lot about gun nut groups opposing legislation that is targeting minorities. You do from the Second Amendment crowd, and we'll get into that. But first, I want to give someone that isn't within that community a quick way to tell the difference between the two. There's a program ran by the Department of Defense called the Civilian Marksmanship Program. They put surplus firearms out on the market pretty cheaply. Okay? I think the Army should give those surplus firearms to citizens. Gun nuts and Second Amendment supporters alike are going to be like, yeah, and start with low-income families. Second Amendment supporters, yeah. Gun nuts, whoa, hang on now a minute. Let's think about this. Don't you think that'll make the gang problem worse? They will find a way to tactfully remind you that you'd be arming minorities. That sentence has never let me down. I've been using it for years, and people out themselves very quickly when you say that. When you're walking into a gun store, you can even see it within you can even see that divide there. There are a lot of gun stores that provide free training to minority groups or marginalized groups. Those are Second Amendment gun stores. You can walk into other ones and see the rebel flag hanging. Those are gun nuts. There is a huge difference. Now, the other question I got was, is gun control low-key racist? No. In some cases, it's very racist. In some cases, it's unintentionally racist. And in some cases, it's not racist at all. A good example of unintentionally racist is the push to have firearms insured. Okay? It doesn't seem like it would be racist. The idea behind it, in case you don't know, is that if insurance companies insured firearms, they would keep track of their client. If their client started showing signs of becoming an active shooter, they'd revoke his insurance, therefore he can't have a firearm anymore. Makes sense, but let's look at a wider implication to it. Who can't afford the insurance? Low-income families, right? Who's going to be disproportionately affected by that? Pretty quick, it starts to come into focus. Yeah, that's who's going to lose out. It's going to disproportionately affect minority groups. And again, from a Second Amendment standpoint, we want them to have firearms more than just about anybody. Who needs it more from a Second Amendment standpoint? The black guy in the working class neighborhood or the white dentist in a gated subdivision? Now, one that was very racist was there was a push to ban light pistols. And by light, I mean their weight, how much they weighed. Now, it doesn't sound racist, doesn't seem to make sense, but it doesn't sound racist. Here's the thing. Light pistols are made with less expensive metal. Okay, so they're cheaper. They're cheaper. We called them Saturday night specials back in the day. I don't know if that term's still around, but basically these things are pretty much exclusively bought by minorities in urban areas. You know, if you're poor white folk, you're probably going to buy a cheap shotgun. It was very targeted towards a very specific demographic of people. Second Amendment crowd lost their minds, raised a huge stink. It got defeated. You didn't hear much from the gun nuts, though. They didn't really oppose it because it wasn't targeting their in group. It wasn't targeting the people they want to have power. Now, historically, gun control has had a racial component. I don't think that it is as big a problem today as it used to be. And I think that part of that is because the Second Amendment crowd has done a good job of pointing it out. Anytime it comes up, they're very quick to say, so you just want to take guns away from these people? And no, there are very few congressmen and senators today that are willing to take that kind of heat. And to give you a good example of how the gun nut crowd will even idolize somebody who has supported gun control if it's targeting minorities is Ronald Reagan. You know, he's seen as like Mr. NRA. You need to look at some of the gun control he signed because it was directly influenced because of the civil rights movement. And so there is a marked difference. Like I said, I don't think that I don't think supporters of gun control today have that racial bias necessarily. I think that they haven't thought about it. I don't think they've ever. I don't think they've ever really put it in that view. They're looking at it from a very different lens, so they don't see it like that. And a lot of them, you have to understand, a lot of them have no idea that the intent of the Second Amendment, maybe not when it was written because it didn't apply to them, but it's to arm minority groups. You know, when it was written, it was more about ideological minorities. As we include more and more people in America's blanket of freedom, today it is more important for a racial minority to be armed than just about anybody else. The Second Amendment is there to protect them. It's supposed to be anyway. You know, there's that there's that poem. You know, first they came for the Jews. I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew. It goes on and on. Second Amendment supporters want to make sure that if the government ever comes for minorities in the U.S., nobody has to say anything because it's going to get so loud, everybody's going to know. So there's a primer on race, guns, and gun control. Now, there's a whole lot more to this, and there is a very sharp historical trend with gun control and racism. I don't see it as much today. I really don't. Maybe I'm just not looking at it through the right lens, but most of what I see today, even when it does have a racial component to it, most times it seems to be very unintentional, and it seems to be people not realizing what it's going to do. And then, Second Amendment supporters, believe me, even when they're saying something rude, they're doing it with the intent of getting you to buy a gun. So, not the actions of a Klansman. Y'all have a good day.